Welcome to the show, Kayla. We're so excited that you're here and big fans of you. And, you've dedicated your work to supporting women's health and longevity. And I'm so curious, where did that passion come from? Was it a curiosity? Was it a frustration or something more personal? I would love to dig into that a little bit.
Yeah, I got really deep into the biohacking, I guess, like longevity industry about 5 years ago when I went to go open a longevity medicine clinic. So I started doing all of these labs on myself that my doctors had never recommended that I even take. And then more or less, how to optimize them or looking for these optimal ranges. But when I started to really dive deep into this world, we know that a lot of the medical literature is actually based on males. So women weren't even required to be included in, research and studies until the early 1990s. So about like when I was born. So it hasn't been a long time. Therefore, a lot of the longevity, research and the protocols out there are made for men by men. And we also know, I think, in the industry, and I'm super grateful for all of the incredible men that are in the industry. Pretty much all of them are my friends. We're so grateful for their work, but it's a little bit of a boys club, right? So like the most known people in longevity are men. And so a lot of what's out there is for men. So as I really began to dive deep into these protocols, I was watching some of my labs trend in the wrong direction. So I was doing a lot of these, what I would call for men by men protocols, because that's what's there. That's what the research is done on. I was watching my thyroid health decline. I was watching my hormones become a bit dysregulated. And throughout this personal journey, it became more and more evident to me that we, number one, just don't have answers to a lot of the questions that we have as women, right? Like, the ovaries age at 2x the speed, double the speed of all other organs. And we really don't know why. And I've had some of the top, academics. I have a podcast as well on my podcast, and we're really just at a place that we don't really know. So I was like, okay, I'm going to take what I do know. I'm going to take my medical team, because I was fortunate enough to have a medical team that I employed because of the clinic. And let's just all dig in as deep as we can and see what we can find for women. And then I'll try it on myself. I'll release the results publicly. And of course, we're all bio-individual. So what works really well for me as a woman might not work, amazing for you guys, but at least we'll start to have a little bit of a framework and start to have a little bit of an understanding of how our physiology is so different than male physiology.
I can definitely relate to what you're saying, especially having been in this space for about 16 years now of functional medicine, trying a lot of the things that worked for the boys, trying to be a part of the 5 a.m. club, the cold plunge club, the keto club, and all of that, and kind of seeing my body react very negatively to some of those things. I'm curious what you think, just working with women and speaking to women, what are the main challenges that women face in this modern world when it comes to their health? What are the biggest ones that you're seeing?
Yeah, I'm also really blessed, right, to have like a fairly large community of almost all women. So it's really great. And so I do get to hear a lot of candid feedback. I think that, hormonal dysregulation is a big one for women. Gut health issues are a big one for women. I feel like we've almost tried to like normalize this. I see this like reel on social media going around like hot girls have gut issues or something. I don't think that's true. I don't think that we need to have that. It's uncomfortable. And I always say, and a lot of people say this, that just because it's common doesn't mean it's normal, right? So I think gut health issues, hormonal issues. For an example, I have not had really any PMS symptoms my entire, last 7, 8, 9 years of life. And that is a huge issue, right? We know that that's actually a signal of something. I don't have them, some of it may be genetics, but I believe a big part of it is because of the lifestyle and because I'm able to really dial in my hormones, to a T. So I think that's another issue. I know that a lot of women struggle with sometimes like acne, things like that. I think there's a lot going on. And then that's like just in the child rearing, like, premenopausal years, right? And then we have an entirely different set of struggles when we get into perimenopause and menopause. So it's just simply so different for men and women. My husband and I look at his stats, I look at his labs, I look at everything he's doing, I look at his sleep, all of that. And I compare it to mine. And yes, that's only N of 1, but it's so blatantly obvious that in every single area of health optimization, women differ from men. That is from sleep. We need more of it. We can go, into the deep nuance of these, but I found sleep differences, nutritional differences. You can eat based on your cycle. You can train based on your cycle. Then when you get into perimenopause, you have different requirements. Same thing, with menopause. And also, stress. I think that's one of the biggest things. We know that women perceive higher levels of stress. So we actually experience stress at higher levels. We are, our cortisol is spiked easier. So for example, with cold plunging, like you mentioned. So for women, if my husband and I keep our cold plunge on the same temperature, let's say he wants to keep it at, 35 Fahrenheit, I'm going to have a much more significant cortisol response to that cold plunge than he is. So if I'm constantly doing that and I already have a baseline higher level of stress as a woman, then of course that's going to lead to dysregulation, and it's not going to be optimal for our health span or, our longevity.
Oh my gosh, I feel like there's so much to unpack there. And I'm curious, before we go into maybe some of these bigger habits that make a difference, like sleep, stress management, food, you mentioned you were on so many protocols for men by men. And I just want to call that out. Maybe you can share, Kaya mentioned some that she went through, but what were some of the ones that you were doing that you noticed really were impacting your labs like 6 years ago before you got into this space?
Yeah. Caloric restriction is a huge one. So we know that caloric restriction is one of the most science-backed practices for longevity, right? So, I believe a 20 to 30% caloric restriction in mice then yielded a 20 to 30% roughly longer, lifespan in these mice. So really popular in the longevity industry, but for women specifically, I was doing way too much. I was doing caloric restriction. I was doing fasting. And then on top of that, I was stacking, frequent cold plunging. So it's really about dialing back a lot of these habits and then optimizing them throughout your cycle, because it's not that we can't do cold plunging. It's just that we have to do it in another way. But I would say one of the biggest ones was, the caloric restriction. I would say the fasting at all times of the month is another big change that I made. The sleep, which you mentioned, 5 a.m. club. Depending on what time you go to bed, you could be a part of the 5 a.m. club. But the research points out that women need at least between I believe it's 11 and 20 minutes of more sleep. But I've found, just from my own studies and my own practices, that I need at least an hour more than my husband. So those are just a couple of the things that I was doing. But it really comes down to reining in the amount and the intensity and then optimizing that with your cycle if you're in a cycle.
You mentioned caloric restriction there, which I'd love to talk about, because I think that still, most women's introduction into wellness is weight loss, right? That's a huge goal that a lot of women still have. And I think that heavy caloric restriction is still kind of like the standard of how to lose weight or how to lose weight quickly. Can you talk about maybe your experience working with women who are focused on weight loss? What is a healthier way for women to achieve the goals that they're trying to achieve? Is caloric restriction still part of that?
Yeah, and just for clarity too, I don't work with women one-on-one. I'm not a provider or a doctor, but I do have a huge, community of women and a membership, and we talk about this a lot. So, my thoughts on caloric restriction is it's definitely not the first lever that I would pull. Sure, there is a world that we do need to pay somewhat attention to the calories that we eat, especially in the beginning, right? Because I am not a firm believer of calories in, calories out is the only thing that matters. Definitely not. I think the quality of the calories matter. But I would also say adding on muscle mass for women. I think of muscle mass as almost like a metabolic Spanx, right? Like this is going to sink more of your glucose. So you'll have a better insulin response, better metabolic health, but also muscle burns more calories at rest. So for me, if I was just starting out and I was wanting to lose weight, of course, yes, I would first immediately cut out all the processed, ultra processed foods. These foods are developed to be addictive. It's wild. I haven't eaten this stuff in so long that I have absolutely no desire for it, but I've smelled it before. Like a friend will try to encourage me to eat it because people think it's funny, but I smell it, and I've even put some in my mouth and spit it out before. And the taste of this food is not like the food that I eat, right? And it's designed to be so though. It's designed to be addictive, and it's really not even your fault for being addicted. They have scientists in the back, like developing it to be addictive. So I would try to get off the ultra processed foods and processed foods, because not only are they addictive and bad for weight loss, but they're also bad for your biology. Every single piece of food that I eat, I'm thinking of it in terms of, is this going to be beneficial to my biology, or is it going to be harmful? I say you literally are what you eat. Do you want to be a bag of Doritos and a Twinkie, or do you want to be like, wild caught salmon and blueberries? What do you think is going to make your body operate better and your brain operate better? That would be the first thing. And then I would be focusing on protein requirements, because we know that protein is really satiating. I think that's another lie that we've kind of been told as women. I do believe that lie is kind of being, walked back now, but having these salads with these like processed dressings on top of it, and then these like high carb intake, this is just a metabolic disaster for women. We also see, you asked about issues that women are experiencing. PCOS is just through the roof right now. Fertility issues are a huge issue. It's not just fertility for women. Men are 50% of that equation as well, but a lot of metabolic issues going on. So that would be kind of the second thing I would do. And then really focusing on adding high quality muscle, because it's going to make that whole journey and weight loss experience, number one, more enjoyable, because you'll feel satiated. You're not going to feel starving and hungry all the time. And then you're going to be adding on muscle that will actually increase your resting metabolic rate, and you'll burn more calories. For me, I don't count calories at all at this point. I think it's helpful for people to understand calories, because you can be having one of these like Starbucks beverages, which of course, are not recommended, but the amount of calories in these things are just insane. It can be like, 1,500 or 2,000 calories in a single drink. So I think it's important to be aware of, but definitely, focusing on just eliminating processed foods and adding on that muscle mass and hitting your protein requirements will be so helpful.
It's so crazy. So Kayla, we obviously interview people like you all the time. So I quote unquote know all these things. And even yesterday, just talking about protein, I had like probably an earlier lunch. I wasn't too hungry for dinner. I probably wasn't feeling as well. And I had sushi. So not like my typical protein intake. And I remember at night feeling a little more anxious. And I'm like, this is strange. Like, is it the time of the month? Like, why do I feel different? In the morning, I felt more anxious. And right when I had a solid protein breakfast, I was like, all that anxiety is gone. And sometimes I need that even reminder for myself. So that just kind of got me thinking. You mentioned early on that women are more impacted by stress. Their cortisol levels are more impacted. So many women that I know are managing something in their life that can be stressful. All of us, right? So what are some mechanisms that you would recommend for women to really take seriously to start that self-care, to really manage that stress in their life?
Absolutely. May I add one more note about just like related to nutrition? So another big finding that I had is I was training fasted a lot, very popular again in the longevity space. And what I found, and actually I really learned this through my interviews with Dr. Stacey Sims, who's amazing in the fitness and space, and she has a PhD in this realm. And she said, definitely don't train fasted for women. So now I'm doing at least 15 to 20 grams of protein prior to working out. So that's another like big, I think, takeaway for women. I have it in what I call a protein coffee. So I have a little bit of organic coffee with about 15 to 20 grams of collagen. And then I add some colostrum in there and about 5 grams of creatine. And I have that all right before I work out. So that can be maybe a takeaway. I mean, stress is the hardest one to really manage, right? Because we can have a checklist and we can take our supplements and we can go to the gym and we can do 10,000 steps a day and we can get morning sun and go to bed on time. But stress is really difficult to manage, even for someone like me. It's one of my biggest goals this year is to reduce my stress. And I measure mine on my Oura ring, and some people can say that's more stress inducing, right? But I like to know what the data is so I can see what's working on reducing stress and what's not. And I found some interesting things be really helpful. So what I'm doing now is I'm building an intentional, I call it parasympathetic activation blocks into my day. So I have at least 4 blocks of time that I'm intentionally putting my body into parasympathetic, and I can see on my Oura ring that I'm going from stressed down to relaxed or restored. So a few things that I do are breath work. I mean, this is free. You can do this at any point in the day, but I would literally put it on my calendar. So I have it 1 in the morning, 1 in the late morning, early afternoon, mid-afternoon, and evening. So minimum 4 times, usually more. And I'm stopping what I'm doing. I'm not scheduling anything during that time. And I'm focusing on my breath. I'm doing deep inhales, super long exhales. There's amazing free apps for this. Oura Ring has, a meditation and breath work component of theirs. You can do open. There's tons of free stuff. You don't even need an app, just breathing in like box breathing, like 4x4 breathing is really helpful. And then eventually doing a longer exhale than inhale. I also have a little device that I like. It's called a Moonbird. So it kind of expands, and it's a breath trainer. So I use that a few times per day too. So it really just helps you to focus on your breath and slow down. Also taking a walk. So anytime that I'm starting to feel like stressed, we know, I just interviewed an amazing neuroscientist the other day, and we know these things, right? But it's always great to hear it again. So just being in nature, there's beautiful nature behind me. So my neighborhood is very like full and lush, but seeing the colors of nature and smelling the smells, getting back into your senses actually can bring you back to your body instead of just in this ultra stressed state. Getting in those steps, being in nature, and just taking some time to de-stress is so important. Something interesting, this is obviously way on the advanced level, but things that also can help put me into a parasympathetic is I have a hyperbaric oxygen chamber here at the house. I found this to be one of the really cool additional benefits outside of like brain health and telomere lengthening and all that, is that as soon as the chamber is fully pressurized, I go from being stressed to being restored, and I stay there the entire time. So, I have multiple companies that I'm overseeing. I do work a lot. Health optimization is a big part, but I'm still managing quite a bit. I'm a new wife. We intend on having children, and women are experiencing stress unlike any time before, right? We're managing high expectation careers. We're managing the home life, our family, and so much more. And then on top of that, we have the social media and like constant comparison and unlimited access. So, I totally get why it's the hardest one. I am really focusing on this myself this year. And then if we think about, is it the brain influencing the body or the body influencing the brain, right? So we are talking about practices to shift into parasympathetic, but you also have to make sure that you are as optimized as possible, I think, to help reduce your stress. Making sure that your magnesium stores are where they need to be, that your nutrient levels are doing well, that you're getting really high quality sleep. For me, sleep is the biggest thing for longevity. I build my entire schedule around sleep. I'm organizing a dinner right now, and everybody wants to meet at 6:30. And I'm like, guys, if I drive an hour and at 6:30, I can't be in bed by 8:30. So we're moving it up, and, we're meeting earlier. And sometimes I just can't go. People might think that's not fun, but I build my schedule around sleep. And if you just get high quality sleep, your baseline stress will be less. Even one night of poor sleep increases your blood pressure, increases your cortisol, increases your hunger hormones. You'll be having more cravings. So really just focusing on sleep, and even exercise is great for reducing your stress over time. And walks are amazing. So thinking about these things intentionally, we can't let stress reduction go to the back burner, because we know that we probably won't do it if it's not scheduled into our calendar and if it's not as top of mind as, for example, the supplements.
Oh my gosh, I love this. I love that you proactively booked moments of getting into your parasympathetic during your schedule, because I know you're busy running multiple companies, and I'm like, what is the behind the scenes to manage that stress? Because I know you're also so passionate about your work. And that was my question in regards to dinners, because I feel the same way. If I don't get a good night's sleep, I am a different person, and I know what it feels like to sleep well. I feel like I'm less stressed. I'm less anxious. I'm more patient. I run my business better. I'm a better wife. I'm a better friend. So like when I hear you say you don't go to some dinners, I'm like, okay, I love that. Cause I was like, how do you manage that? So you either move it up and you make like, what's your protocol, I guess, for when do you get home? When do you go to bed? I'd love to unpack that.
Yeah. So, wind down protocol, really, like, I give so much credit to that. And by the way, I have validated the sleep protocol in my sleep through Oura Ring. It's been interesting, a little fun test I've been doing. So I got a Whoop. You guys are familiar with Whoop, right? And it's actually really easy to get 100 every single night on Whoop. I don't know if you guys have tried this, but ever since I got a Whoop, I've gotten 100 every single night, because it's a very different metric than Oura. So Oura, it really is like calculating everything about your sleep, but Whoop, like, you can get 100 if you just stay in bed the amount of hours that they want you to stay in bed. So yes, going off Oura, I think wind down routine is so important. So I am working from home actually, so I'm already home, but I start as soon as my husband gets home. So he gets home about 5:00 and I have dinner ready then. So first thing that's so important is eating early, right? So as soon as the sun is set, I think everybody should be done eating completely. It's just the most natural way to go about things, but also minimum 3 hours prior to bed. I've seen that make a massive change in terms of my sleep quality. And then we have dinner. So dinner at about 5 o'clock, and then we go for a long walk. We live in the hills, so we get a little bit of zone 2 cardio. It's also great for blood sugar. So just a tip, if anyone is eating, a higher carbohydrate meal or just wants to reduce their blood sugar post meal, a postprandial walk. Studies show even as little as 3 minutes, but we take about an hour long evening walk. It gives us time to catch up on the day and connect, but we also get some exercise. When we come back, our house is entirely red. So we have red lights throughout the house. You could do red light, blue light blockers too. So the red versions, not the yellow, because they're going to block out more blue light. So everything is red in the house. And we just do some intentional wind down. So some reading, some breath work. I always recommend that you don't watch anything ultra anxiety inducing. Like my mom was here in LA for a few days and she was watching these murder shows at night. And I'm like, what is going on here? And I was like, how is that winding you down? I had to go in another room, but I don't know. She seemed to like it. But things like that theoretically should not be relaxing, because, it's a little bit aggressive. So never watching aggressive things. And then, we're in bed by 8:30 every single night. So it's fairly short wind down routine, but it's all focused on getting my resting heart rate as low as possible prior to bed.
I love that. And my husband's always like, this is our time to connect. Let's watch this scary movie. And I'm like, no. We're not watching anything scary. And also too, I know that sleep is so important. I'm over here just crying because I've been either pregnant, newborn, toddler phase for the past 4 years of my life. So sleep is a distant dream to me, but it'll come back. I know that. I love though that the tips that you're offering, even from your blocks of the parasympathetic blocks that you're implementing and then your wind down routine, they're simple stuff, right? It's nothing crazy. It's nothing that, would require very expensive equipment. I'd love to talk about the rest of your daily routine. Can we go through maybe your morning routine and what it looks like throughout the day, how, you schedule some of these things into get rest, get breaks, make food and all of that, just for anybody who's curious and listening.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to focus on the fact that if you master the basics, you're going to be healthier than 95% of people, right? Because everybody's always asking me, and yes, I do all these wild things remove all of my plasma and stem cells and hyperbaric chambers and crazy blue IVs, all this stuff. But it's so important to know if you just master the basics, which are mostly free or super low cost, you're going to be 95% of the way there. So things like sleep, nutrition, exercise, movement, breathing. I always say master the things you do every day. We eat, we sleep, we breathe, we move, and we also have social connection. So if you can master those areas, which again are either low cost or free, then you'll be doing really well. So this is, I just want to say that before I get into my entire daily routine, because it's going to probably sound like a lot and be a little bit too much for most people, but I would recommend just pick out what does work for you and what you can incorporate into your life and then leave the rest, So for me, I wake up naturally. So I go to bed at 8:30. So that means I'm waking up typically around 5:30. The first thing that I do is do my oral routine actually. So I do oil pulling, I do a little bit of flossing, I do tongue scraping. I have a red light, blue light, little mouth insert. So the red light is good for inflammation in the gums. The blue light is good for teeth whitening. I also do oral microbiome testing. So our oral microbiome is just incredibly important. You guys have probably had some great biological dentists on. I'll leave that to them. But yeah, making sure your oral microbiome is optimized. Then I go get a big glass of water with electrolytes just to hydrate first thing in the morning. And then I sit on something called a pulsed electromagnetic field therapy device. And I do my brain training, I do my meditation, and for me, I also do prayer and gratitude. So that takes about 25 minutes or so in the morning. Then I get morning sun. So I do a walk outside, just let sunlight get into the eyes. That's about 10 to 30 minutes, depending on the lux of the light. There's an app called Lux Meter. You can figure out, the lux of the sun, and then you can determine how long to stay out there. If I didn't live in a sunny climate like LA, I would probably get a Lux lamp or maybe a Spurdy lamp. And then I head to the gym. So I go into a gym, and my workout routine, I work out 5 to 6 days a week, but it's all focused specific on longevity markers. So I'm doing 2 days of VO2 max training. That's been really fun to watch because I've implemented that over the last 6 months, and I watched my cardiovascular age go from -6 years to -11.5 in just 6 months. So that's super exciting. VO2 max training is essentially pushing your body to use the maximum amount of oxygen as possible. So I do something called, it's a 4x6. So it normally would be a Norwegian 4x4, but actually Dr. Sims told me that women do much better with a 4 minutes of all out followed by 6 minutes of recovery. So we're doing 4 minutes of about 90 to 95% max heart rate, and then 6 minutes of recovery, and then repeating that 4 times. So that's for VO2 max. I'm also focusing on things like strength. So I just hit my best grip strength PR ever. It's 100 pounds, which is kind of wild. I'm not sure if you guys know too much about grip strength, but it's about, it's the top 1% of almost like elite athletes in terms of grip strength. So strength training, I'll do a lot of compound lifting because we know that women, so important to maintain the strength and health of our bones. So we'll do squats, deadlifts, just adding on as much muscle mass as I can now when it's easier, so that I will be able to draw upon that later when it gets harder to put on muscle mass. Sarcopenia will set in, osteoporosis. So focusing on that. I also do a day of power training. So focusing on those fast twitch fibers so we don't lose them as we age. So that looks like box jumps and speed squats and speed push-ups. It's kind of like a little HIIT circuit training. And then I also incorporate stretching and mobility and balance into my training sessions at least 3 times per week. So I'm trying to hit all of these longevity metrics, right? We know our cardiovascular system matters, our strength matters, our VO2 matters, and our balance and mobility, because we want to keep those and maintain them as we age. After the gym, I head home, and then I make my morning breakfast. Oh, I did forget the morning coffee before the gym. So I have that before I leave to the gym, but when I'm doing my son, and then I have my breakfast. Usually is something like a few eggs, some fermented foods, a salad of some sort with some greens, a little bit of EVOO, some avocado, a handful of blueberries. And then I have a coconut yogurt because I'm always aiming to get at least 100 grams of protein in a day. So I do a coconut yogurt, and then I load it with more collagen protein and protein in there with like some Zen basil seeds. Zen basil seeds, they have like half of your daily fiber. So they're kind of like chia seeds, but Zen basil seeds, put those in there, put some like hemp, put some flax, and then I throw my blueberries in there. So that's my breakfast. And then I will do a sauna after that. And so I give a little bit of time before I get into the sauna just to digest. So I'll do sauna. If I'm in the follicular phase, I do cold therapy. If I'm in the luteal phase, I don't do any cold therapy. And then I will take a shower. I also have a red light therapy panel built into my sauna. So I'm doing red light and the sauna at the same time, which is really nice. Then I'll do my shower. And that's really my morning routine. The rest of it, I kind of build in throughout the day. So here at my desk, I have this little device called a Nanovi. I have my desk kind of set up for optimization. So the Nanovi is good at reducing oxidative stress, improving protein folding. I'm sitting on the PEMF that I bring into my office after my morning, and then I get that throughout the day. I think of PEMF as like grounding on steroids. So you could also just go outside and make contact with the earth. That's a free way to do it. I have a little red light therapy cap sitting here. So this one is for my hair protocol. I leave it on 10 minutes a day, but I put this on in the morning. And then I have an intranasal photobiomodulation. So that's red light therapy for your brain. And that helps with my focus and just overall cognitive health, I would say, and brain health. And so I do those things throughout the day. And then I also do my hyperbaric oxygen therapy around 4 o'clock. I also do my work within like 90-minute work blocks. And then I'll take a break. I'll either do my walking pad or go outside for a walk. I also try to take as many calls, like phone calls that I have on a walk, just to keep getting those steps in. And then my husband, comes home around 5, and then we get into the evening routine.
Wow, that's incredible. I mean, it's truly amazing to hear all of that. And going back to the exercise component, you mentioned that if you were in your follicular phase, I forget exactly what was going on with that right there, but with your exercise, does that change depending on where you are in your cycle, or is it pretty standard each week?
It definitely changes slightly. You know, as I mentioned, I don't really have any PMS symptoms. So if I did, I'd probably modify it a little bit more. But I do all my hardest workouts in the follicular phase. So for anyone that's listening that doesn't know, the follicular phase is day 1 through about day 14. So it's the day 1 is when you actually bleed. So you start bleeding, that's marking day 1. And then up through ovulation essentially is your follicular. And then the second half is the luteal. So we have this high estrogen in the follicular phase, which helps us recover faster, be stronger, hit our best PRs. So I really push myself during that time. And then in the luteal, I will ease up a little bit. So I'm still doing training, but I'm not trying to necessarily hit, my best PRs, adding on weights. And depending on how I feel, and if you're listening to this, if you struggle in like late luteal, for example, you could just dial back that training and do something more like, slow flow yoga or, less sets. You can reduce the amount of volume that you're doing as well. So yes, I definitely tweak it based on where I'm at. But you could do that even more based on knowing these principles.
Yeah, it's interesting. I recently started strength training and I also don't have PMS symptoms, but in my luteal phase, I'll notice I'm not as strong. And at first I'm like, should I still go? And it's like, no, I force myself and you just kind of adjust, right? I'm like, I'm not killing it like before, but it's just so interesting to see how your body does change from the follicular phase and luteal phase and like the amount of weight I can push on versus not. But honoring how you feel, like you had mentioned, is so key. And I love all these devices and learning about it. And again, so impressed by your routine. You mentioned something about oxidative stress that you keep on your desk. What is that device and what does it do on your desk? I'm so curious.
Yeah, it's called a Nanovi. I actually measure my oxidative stress too. So I do, thousands of biomarkers every single quarter, lots of imaging, just all sorts of different labs. One thing that I didn't mention that I also do once a week is I do at-home biometrics. So at home, I do a blood pressure cuff. I do a spirometer, which is a measurement of lung health. I do a bioimpedance scale. I actually do that several times a week, but that tells me of course, weight, but body composition, muscle mass, bone density, and if things are trending in the right or wrong direction. And I'm also, of course, looking at like Oura Ring, sleep, HRV, all of that on a daily basis. So the Nanovi is good for reducing oxidative stress and improving protein folding. They have quite a few papers on their website, but it's essentially creating an easy water, like an exclusion zone water. So all that you really do is you put on a nasal cannula and you just sit there and you just breathe. So you can't overdo this. So that's why it's so nice. I try to build things that are easy while I'm doing work. So I can be doing all my emails and doing a Nanovi at the same time, which is really nice. Same thing with PEMF and the red light. Like a lot of these things I try to incorporate into my day, because if I didn't, in all fairness, I would be spending like the entire day doing health optimization.
I'm curious, through this experience of yours, how have the people in your family responded? Like, is your mom getting into this stuff, or like your friends, your close, like, how are they feeling about all of this?
Yeah, I mean, my mom definitely has gotten so much healthier just over the course of the last few years. When she was here in LA, it was so fun, like watching her want to do, like, I have like a little red light that goes on your blood vessels on your neck, and she like wanted to use it every day. It was so fun. She's gotten on HRT, which was an interesting conversation because it's wild. My mom lives in Ohio, like small town, and she is 54. And when she went to go talk about HRT with her doctor was still under the impression that HRT causes cancer. So this was like, as we know, like a blockbuster study over 20 years ago. It's now been, proven to be incorrect if you use the right type of HRT and start at the right time. And so, yeah, her doctor would not give her HRT, which I found really interesting that was still the conversation that was being had in Ohio, because of course, all my friends that are medical doctors, that they are prescribing HRT, bioidentical, of course. So then I, set her up at my clinic, which is also in Ohio. And, now she's on HRT. She's like thriving, feeling so much better. So yeah, it's really fun. I will say though that I got her a gut test. She has not sent it in. I think that she thinks the gut test is going to give me like a printout or something of the last thing she ate. And I'm going to be like, what is this? So the gut test is also not glamorous. I know you guys have probably done one, but not that enjoyable, but the information is priceless. So I love them.
I will say that's the hardest one, I think, to get people to do, is like pooping into a tray and like mixing it up. And that one, it will sit in people's homes for like months or a year before they do it.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, the first time I had to like throw it away. I couldn't even do it. But then after a while, you're just like, okay, this is fine. My friends love it. They're like, love the hyperbaric oxygen chamber. And they're like, always like, let's check my biometrics. And, I have these like female longevity dinners over here. And we're literally passing around like a grip strength tester. So I think at this point, like I've just attracted all of these women that are interested in this stuff. And it makes my life easier because like, no one's inviting me out to like, a nightclub or like past 8:00 because they're like, oh, Kayla's already in bed. We're not inviting them.
I know the other day somebody invited me to a founder's dinner and the dinner started at like 8:30 p.m. And I'm like, that is a no way I can't make that.
Yeah, absolutely not. That feels like such a New York thing to do.
It is, right? I'm like, it's a New York thing for sure.
Yeah.
In LA. I think it was like a wellness dinner too, which made me kind of chuckle. But I love all this stuff. And I'm curious, where does your husband kind of stand? Does he mirror everything you're doing? I mean, clearly it seems like he's on the lifestyle with the bedtime routine and everything, but where does he kind of stand in all this longevity work?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, he's all in. Our first date was in a hyperbaric oxygen chamber, so I'm pretty sure he knew what he was getting himself into here. When he went into my apartment, he said the only thing I had was health robots, is what he called them. So it was like little devices, like red light and cold and all this stuff. So yeah, he totally knew what he was getting himself into, but he loves it. I mean, we did a lot of really fun things. Like I helped him, get his testosterone up, over 900 naturally. And so he was really bought in once he started seeing some of the practical application and the real world results. But yeah, he loves it. And I think it's so important to find someone who will do this with you if that's of interest, because it would be incredibly difficult for me to maintain the lifestyle I have if I was coming home and my husband wanted to eat chips and drink beers on the couch all night. That would be really tough, So I think finding a partner who's into this stuff too is really important.
I've heard you also say that you guys are kind of prepping for your fertility together. And I'm wondering what that looks like for you. There's so many things that women are facing right now. Are you lowering your toxic burden? How are you kind of getting ready for that journey if you want to share?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually did a full YouTube video on this too, if anybody wants to go study it. But this is just what I'm doing for me. Again, it's probably way, way, way too much, but I want to be as optimal as possible. So yeah, I mean, did all my labs, wanting to get them in peak position. So a Nutri-Eval, looking at my nutrient statuses, making sure those are absolutely optimal. Biological age, getting that in the best place it can be. Also the total toxic burden. I've really had to take a detour, here because my toxic burden was amazing and I was so excited. And then the LA fires hit and it is a completely different story right now. So just by breathing in the air in LA, even with air filtration, I went from having 1 to 2 toxins in the medium range to having 29 in the high range. It's absolutely wild. So now I'm doing a big protocol to get that back in optimal. So I did therapeutic plasma exchange. I'm doing EBOs. I'm doing, of course, a lot of binders, a lot of cruciferous vegetables and, variety of different supplements to help with that. But yeah, ideally getting my total toxic burden in the best place it can be, ensuring my general labs, inflammation is really low. Luckily, this has been the trajectory I've been on for, the last 6 years or so, really in depth. So my numbers are really good. And other than the toxic burn now, which I'm optimizing, but yeah, I'm trying to optimize every single lab that I have in order to be at my absolute best. And it's exciting because we know that we have that 3-month window for both men and women. And as a side note, I put my husband through all this stuff too, because it's 50-50 here, right? I'm contributing 50% and so is he. We've also done a lot of in-depth fertility testing. So for women and men, you really can't know fertility until you start trying and if you get pregnant or not. But for men, you can look at motility and the shape or morphology of them. And, he's in the top percentile. And then I've done AMH testing and looking at the follicles and just the anatomy, and some of the blood work too. So everything looks like it's in a good spot. So we're definitely going to be starting to try this year, probably in a few months once I get that tox burden back down within normal ranges, because it's just kind of wild. But doing all that. But if it's 3 months before, focusing on like nutrition and supplementation and optimizing, any deficiencies that you have or, insufficiencies, in terms of supplementation, I think can be really helpful. I'm excited to see the conversation around fertility evolve a little bit, because I feel like when I was looking, I actually did egg freezing before we start trying, because, my husband and I got married. I was in my early 30s. I'm 34 now. I wanted to freeze some of those eggs before we start trying, because we actually want like 5 or 6 kids. So if we wanted 1 or 2 kids, we probably wouldn't have done that. But because we want so many, we did. And I interviewed so many doctors just to figure out who I wanted to go with. And I would ask questions like, do you think that, your diet or exercise or lifestyle have anything to do with, your fertility status? And they were like, no, no, no. And I'm like, okay, probably not going to be a good fit for me. So I eventually did find some amazing doctors, and I'm excited for that conversation to change. Of course, there are times, and my heart sincerely goes out to those women that, genetically it is, a big hurdle for them. But I do believe, and I think it's exciting to know that we can have some agency or power over some of these, outcomes as well. I've done some research, and there is definitely a link just between like anti-Müllerian hormone reduction and these, environmental toxins. And it looks like even a link between an IVF, the taking of and the actual acceptance of pregnancy with these high levels of environmental toxins too. So I think these environmental toxins are a huge problem that women are facing. We know that women are exposed to more environmental toxins than men, primarily in the form of personal care products like shampoo and hairspray and these makeup products. So I think if we just start thinking about how can we reduce our burden, it's going to be so helpful. I love the EWG for that. The Skin Deep database, just type in your products and then it can, tell you if it's low or high tox, and then you can start to switch those out.
And I'm so curious, do you have a list anywhere about like the skincare, the makeup, shampoo, conditioner? Kay and I are always talking about this. I'm like, what are you using? What's working?
Do you
have that list?
Find the shampoo. The shampoo is still the hardest thing.
Yeah, it is really hard. I'm about to do a YouTube video because it's a very requested video for sure. So I'll send it to you guys when I get it out, but I'm going to do a breakdown of all the things. I mean, a few brands that I like Nude by Nature for makeup. I think they're really great. I'm currently using Sister's Body for shampoo and conditioner. I've tried a bunch of different things. I mean, I've tried like a million different deodorants over the years and stuff. So it is tough, right? To find things that work and that you like the look of, but are also, lower tox. But we do know that it works. Like, I'll tell you guys a funny story real quick. So I packed my husband all of his products for his gym in the bag. And when we're doing our total tox burden, because we do these every quarter and I do his too, I see all of a sudden like his parabens are increasing. I'm like, what's going on here? And I'm like, how do we think this happened? And he's like, oh, well, I was just using the stuff at the gym. And I was like, okay. But it was wild to me that just, 1 quarter had passed. He was using the products at the gym, which, by the way, this is a nice gym, and the products that they use are healthy as they market them, But we saw his parabens increasing, and that's exactly where it came from. So he he started using the products I packed, and then we saw those levels go down. So, everybody has a different size cup in terms of like their genetics and how they detox. And so it really just depends. Some women can have more toxic exposures and be fine. But the way I think about it is, we have like poor diet, that's kind of filling your cup. And then you have like lack of exercise, that's filling your cup, and poor sleep. And then we add on these environmental toxins, and we're seeing just like this explosion of autoimmune conditions for women, infertility issues, even young cancers. There's so many things in our environment now that we didn't have before. And unfortunately, I feel like we just have to be more vigilant than we've ever had to be.
Yeah, gosh, I'm so glad you're talking about all this. And I know we're coming up on time. Maybe you can share a little bit more about your platform. If anyone's listening and they want to get more into the work that you do, I'd love for you to share a bit more about that.
Well, thank you. My website is Kayla Barnes. My maiden name was Barnes. Now it's Lentz, but KaylaBarnes.com, KaylaBarnes.com. And my Instagram is Kayla Barnes. I also have a female longevity group that's so fun. So it's a monthly membership. It's $19 a month, but we can all share openly there because it's only women. And so I was finding in the comments, you just couldn't be super vulnerable. So it has everything. It has like 25 courses and monthly AMAs and the whole 9 yards. So, that's where you can find it. I also think I'm the only female longevity long form content creator on YouTube. I think I could be wrong, but, that's the best of my knowledge. So I'm putting out long form content on everything, my morning routine, midday routine, evening routine, longevity basics for women, like how I opt to all the things. So
amazing. Well, we love your work. We're just super big fans of everything that you put out. And we're so excited to get this episode out there. People are going to be so interested in your routine. And I definitely walked away writing down some products
Same.
myself. So I'm excited for this one. Thank you so much for joining us.